All right, let's dive into one of the darkest, most terrifying chapters of the 20th century. It's a period of state-sponsored violence in the Soviet Union known as the Great Terror, or more specifically, the Yezhovshchina. We're talking about a terrifying campaign of show trials, mass arrests, and executions that touched every single corner of society and left behind a legacy that is just brutal. But you have to ask, what was the point of all this? Was it just the chaotic paranoia of a dictator running completely wild? Or was there a single driving purpose behind it all? That's the question we're really digging into today. What was the single most significant outcome of Stalin's Great Terror? So first off, let's just break down that name, Yezhovshchina. It literally means the time of Yezhov. And Nikolai Yezhov, he was the head of the NKVD, the Soviet secret police. From 1936 to 1938, he was the face of this unbelievable wave of repression. But make no mistake, this wasn't just chaos. This was terror on an industrial scale. This reign of terror was made official through documents like the infamous NKVD Order 00447. And what that did, basically, was give Yezhov and the state a virtual blank check to hunt down and eliminate anyone they decided was an anti-Soviet element. So who exactly were these so-called anti-Soviet elements? Well, if we want to understand the terror's real goal, we have to look at who was being systematically taken out. And the list, it's as comprehensive as it is chilling. I mean, the sheer scope of the victims is just staggering. This wasn't just one group. The targets included the very top of the Red Army, Stalin's old revolutionary rivals, political leaders from non-Russian parts of the country, entire ethnic minorities, and then this really vague category of former kulaks and criminals. You know what that means? It could mean anyone. Absolutely no one was safe.
Okay, so let's start with the military. The Red Army was one of the most powerful institutions in the entire Soviet Union, and you better believe that to a guy like Stalin, that kind of power was a direct threat.
And the scale of what happened here is just, it's hard to even wrap your head around. Roughly half, 50%, of the entire officer class of the military, the Navy, and the Air Force was either executed or thrown in prison. Just think about that for a second. An army systematically gutting its own leadership. But why? Why on earth would he do this? Well, the answer really gets to the core of his motivation. Stalin knew that the military was the only institution that had the physical power, the real muscle, to actually overthrow him. In his mind, any potential threat, no matter how small, had to be completely and utterly neutralized. But the purge didn't stop with the military, not by a long shot. The next major target was political, the old Bolsheviks. Now, these were the guys who had been with Lenin from the very beginning of the revolution. They weren't just political rivals. They were living, breathing symbols of an era before Stalin had absolute control. And the process was brutally systematic. Through a series of very public show trials, Stalin got rid of every single major figure who could possibly challenge his authority. Zinoviev, Kamenev, Bukharin, all of them, executed. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place in 1940 with the assassination of his ultimate rival, Leon Trotsky, all the way over in Mexico, a job finished by Yezhov's successor, Beria. Which, brings us to a really pivotal question. We see a purge of the army, a purge of the old political guard, the deportation of minorities. Were these just disconnected outbursts from a paranoid dictator, or was there something more calculated going on? A single, unified purpose behind all of it? Well, when you look at all the evidence, it points to one single overarching objective that connects every arrest, every show trial, and every single execution. And here it is. The most significant outcome, and really the primary goal of the Yezhovshchina, was the total consolidation of Joseph Stalin's personal political dominance. Every other horrific outcome was just a means to this one single end. So what did this absolute power actually look like? How did this wave of terror transform Stalin from a party leader into something else entirely? The historian Simon Sebag Montefiore came up with a label that I think just nails it: the Red Tsar. It perfectly captures the new reality. Stalin wasn't just first among equals anymore. He was an absolute autocrat, ruling with the kind of unquestioned authority you'd expect from the old Russian emperors. I mean, just look at the transformation. Before the Great Terror, you had people like Sergei Kurov who could openly disagree with Stalin's policies. Debate, even though it was risky, was still possible. But after the terror, No way. Any kind of contradiction became an automatic death sentence. Fear was the new organizing principle of Soviet politics, and Stalin's word was absolute law. So, okay, the purges cemented Stalin's power. But what's the lasting legacy of achieving that kind of dominance through such unbelievably brutal means? Why does this period still matter so much today? Well, ultimately, the most enduring outcome wasn't just political, it was psychological. A culture of absolute, paralyzing fear came to define Soviet life. It seeped into everything, from the highest levels of the party all the way down to ordinary families, where just one careless word could lead to that knock on the door in the middle of the night. So in the end, when we look back at all these devastating outcomes, the decimated army, the silenced opposition, the persecuted minorities, we can see they weren't really separate tragedies. They were all instruments, all tools used to achieve one goal, the absolute power of the Red Tsar. And that total dominance, built on a foundation of pure terror, is the single most significant outcome of the Yezhovshchina. And that leaves us with one final and pretty chilling question. We've seen how this absolute power was achieved, but it really forces us to ask, how does a nation, a society, ever truly recover when terror itself becomes the very foundation of power?